Welcome back to Marvelous Videos. I'm Rylan. Many superheroes receive a rough bargain when it comes to their parents, since most of them are either lacking one, if not both of their parents. Usually, this is because in their stories, to provide heroes with a traumatic background motivates them to pursue justice, like Batman. In some situations, such as the case with Superman, it's done to give the figure a distinct identity in the comic book industry. However, it's just done to remove any worry of a family constantly appearing, making it simpler to write for the character. However, in some extremely unfortunate situations, the superheroes themselves are the ones to blame for the deaths of their own parents. So, today we present a list of various times that superheroes killed their own parents. But before we get into our list, we do have one very small request. If you like our content, then please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is just one small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thanks. Now, let's begin. Blade. The vampire hunter known as Blade entered the Marvel world in 1973's The Tomb of Dracula, number 10, by Marv Wolfman and Gene Colan. Blade has a well-known grudge against all bloodsuckers, which leads him to become one of the best vampire hunters in the game. Okay, so Blade didn't exactly kill his mother, but the circumstances of her birth did, so hear us out. We all know that Blade was orphaned at birth, with his mother passing away and no sign of a father. The events that led up to his birth were nothing short of gruesome. When Blade Cross's mother, Tara Cross, was pregnant, she took refuge in a brothel to avoid being hunted. However, some complications arose close to delivery, and a doctor was summoned when his mother went into labor. Unfortunately, as luck would have it, it turned out that the doctor was a vampire named Deacon Frost. Blade's mother was murdered as the doctor bit her, sucking out her blood. However, Blade lived and received immortality and immunity to some of the worst aspects of vampirism from the vampire bite. This happened because via the bite, Frost unintentionally transferred unique enzymes that gave the newborn Blade his resistance to vampire bites. Frost then ran away from the scene, abandoning the infant, which Madame Vanity, a proprietor of the brothel, then took in and nurtured. Now, while he didn't kill her himself, Blade does share some of the blame for his mother's passing, albeit in an indirect manner. This is because if she was not pregnant with Blade, or the Blade did not involve any medical complications, the vampire doctor wouldn't have been called, and thus subsequently, he wouldn't have gone on to infect and murder her. In fact, while this may not be a direct connection, the circumstances of his birth have weighed heavily on the vampire slayer. Blade has since made it his life's work to use unique tools and abilities to murder as many vampires as he can, and this is largely motivated by his feelings of guilt and a need for retribution. He is the worst fear for all vampires, and it becomes so due to the tragedy surrounding his birth. Wolverine. Wolverine has been alive for more than a century because of his amazing healing factor, and he's made use of that time to explore the globe and develop into one of Marvel's most formidable fighters. He has sent many people to untimely and gruesome deaths along the road. Although Wolverine became popular right away in the 1970s, his past stayed a mystery for many years, until the 2002 miniseries Origin, which was penned by Bill Jemas, Joe Quesada, and Paul Jenkins, and illustrated by Andy Kubert. No one even really knew who Wolverine's parents were. In fact, the 2001 comic book Origin introduced Wolverine's parents to audiences and revealed that Thomas Logan, Wolverine's biological father, was the first person that the future X-Man had ever murdered. This kill was thus also one of Wolverine's most emotional ones. So here's how it happened. A sickly and underweight infant named James Howlett was born in the late 19th century. James had no clue that he was actually the son of Elizabeth Howlett and the community groundskeeper, a gruff but hardy man by the name of Thomas Logan. He thus grew up safe and pampered in an affluent family in Alberta, Canada. The majority of life's hardships didn't seem to bother James as he was growing up, with the exception of losing his elder brother James to unknown causes. Dog, the groundskeeper's unruly son, was his unaware half-brother, as well as Rose, a neighborhood orphan girl who became close pals with him. Dog ultimately grew more vicious as a result of his father's abuse, which made him increasingly hostile towards James. As a result, Dog attacked Rose and killed James's pet dog. Dog and Thomas Logan were expelled from the land as a result of their behavior, but Logan broke back in to try and take Elizabeth with him. Mr. Howlett, Wolverine's father, then confronted Logan, who then opened fire on him, immediately killing him with a gunshot to the head. James reacted violently after seeing the crime. It had triggered his mutation, causing his bone claws to expand for the first time. James then stabbed Thomas Logan fatally in the chest and unwittingly killed his birth parent. James's life was immediately devastated by the violent act, and the young man was only able to flee capture due to James's grandfather's assistance. He gave them some cash and sent them into the wilderness of British Columbia so they could exist without being bothered by others. James was then given the alias Logan by Rose in order to conceal their identities, and the future X-Man suppressed his memories of what had occurred. Tragically, he would only be reminded of it when dogs sought them out over a decade later in an attempt to exact revenge. Rose was then tragically killed in the fight when she unintentionally walked into Logan's extended claws, which led to the future Wolverine leaving humanity for a while and going into the wild. Unfortunately, Logan had to bear the responsibility of more than one person's death as a result of his own claws, and while his biological father was only the first of many people who would die at the hands of Wolverine over the years, he still ranks among the mutant berserker's most personal murders. Deadpool. Because Deadpool has told lies, managed to forget, or made up alterations to his own history, his past is a bit murky. One Deadpool story goes that when Wade was a child, his father was an abusive man who was later murdered by one of Wade's pals. According to the first ever story, Deadpool was unaware of who his father was. However, a different version of his parents' story is told in the current continuity. Thomas Wilson, the father of Wade Wilson in the current continuity, was first developed in Deadpool number 45 from 2000. By Christopher Priest and James Calafiore. As a random person, Deadpool met in a pub. However, things took an extremely dark turn when Deadpool burned his parents in their beds in the original Sin Plot, published in Deadpool number 34 by Brian Posehn, Jerry Dugan, and Scott Koblish in 2014. Thankfully, he had no idea who they were, so he didn't exactly do it intentionally, but the story is incredibly harrowing. Deadpool wasn't really to blame for the worst crime he ever committed. The butler, who was to blame for his memory loss, made him do it. The butler was a supervillain who was influencing Deadpool in order to access his blood for his own sinister purposes, and was mentally manipulating him at the moment. Butler also ordered Deadpool to kill his own parents in order to demonstrate the complete scope of his control over the popular mercenary. The butler's sister had been diagnosed with cancer, and after learning that Deadpool had been cured of his cancer, the butler began to pester Deadpool. This ultimately resulted in the butler contacting Wade directly and repeatedly administering mind-altering drugs on him, creating some memory problems. Although Butler would occasionally send Deadpool out on missions while he was under this condition, his captor wanted to make sure that the impacts of the drug-induced obedience were effective. In order to make him murder his own parents, he ordered Sabretooth to accompany Deadpool to Canada. Deadpool only saw it as a task that he had to complete, so he had no idea who he was actually murdering. In the end, Deadpool breaks into the house where he was raised. Some unconscious part of Deadpool recognized the home, even in his confused state. When he checked his childhood bedroom, he discovered an old tattered baseball glove underneath the bed. He also recalled where the second key, which was concealed outside, was located, but throughout, he set the stage for the demise of his own family. After placing a number of incendiaries, he checked to see if the pair were still asleep. Then, he lit the property ablaze and left, treating the heinous crime as if it were nothing. It was one of Deadpool's most unsettling and sad experiences, and he wasn't even conscious enough to realize what he had just done. John Constantine. The Tale of Swamp Thing number 37 by Alan Moore, Steve Bissette, and John Totalben featured John Constantine for the first time. He initially appeared as Swamp Thing's otherworldly advisor, and later received his own series. Additionally, he joined the Justice League. However, even with all of his enigmatic and sinister past, Constantine's origin might be the most sinister of all. This is another case of a mother dying during childbirth, much like Blade or even the Black Panther. Prior to becoming pregnant with Constantine, his mother was compelled to have an abortion by his father. This then caused her to experience a lot of pain and complications, and eventually pass away while giving birth to John and his stillborn twin brother. Thus, while he did not exactly kill her or cause her death, John does bear some regret for contributing to the passing of his mother. However, obviously, Constantine's father bears the bulk of the blame. Thankfully, Constantine developed into a strong hero who makes use of his abilities for good, with this grief likely shaping the course of the rest of his life. However, in the new DC Black Label miniseries Hellblazer: Rise and Fall, John gives a brief account of his birth. He is exceptionally quiet and at peace for a newborn baby, and the episode ends with Mary dying as a result of unnoticed health problems. It is because of this unfortunate incident that John's father became an alcoholic and frequently mistreated his young son. Although, as an adult, John thinks that his father still would have loathed him even if his mother had lived through the childbirth. In almost every version of the character's origin story, including the one in Legends of Tomorrow, Mary Constantine dies while giving birth to John, which serves as a somber phenomenon of John's lifelong close relationship with disaster and death. Orion. The most valiant and enduring of all the new gods Jack Kirby invented is Orion. Orion, who was the infamous tyrant Darkseid's son, was exchanged by Highfather to the peaceful planet of New Genesis in order to prevent conflict. Orion was committed to foiling his biological father's plan to subjugate the universe with the anti-life equation. Even though he continued to reside on New Genesis, he was even foretold to slay Darkseid in a prophecy. The prophecy was brought to life in 2008's Countdown to Final Crisis number 2 by Paul Dini, Sean McKeever, Keith Giffen and Scott Collins, as Orion battled to prevent Darkseid from taking control of the universe. The events unraveled in the following manner. Orion's mother had to flee as a result of assaults on her and passed away in Orion's arms during the time that Darkseid had effectively obtained the anti-life equation. Due to this, Orion vowed retaliation on his mother's behalf, further inflaming his resentment for Darkseid. Finally, the father and son team engaged in a fierce conflict on Apokolips. Before the fight between Orion and Darkseid started, Orion agreed to put his mother box away as part of the bargain. In the ensuing battle of warriors, the two titans participated in a cataclysmic confrontation, exchanging powerful blows, fierce kicks, and complete disregard for one another's lives. In the end, the Dog of War triumphed, ultimately realizing the prophecy for which he had been prepared since he was a young child. It comes out that before the final blow, Darkseid had planned to go back on his word and use his Omega beams on Orion. Orion, knowing he could never count on his father to keep his word, activated an Astral Force shield, which turned the Omega beams back to Darkseid and appeared to slay him. After that, Orion took over as King of Apokolips in place of Darkseid, promising to restore hope to the desolate planet. This one is a clear case of patricide, but for the greater good. The Hulk. The story of Hulk's origin maintained that he was supposedly born as a result of a gamma bomb explosion for a very long time, but more recent comics have altered that. The explosion made Bruce Banner large and green, but his father's abuse had already given Bruce Banner the rampaging Hulk character. Brian Banner, who made his first appearance in 1982's The Incredible Hulk number 267 by Bill Mantlo and Sal Buscema, tortured his family because he thought this kid was cursed. Brian was committed to a mental institution after he slashed and killed Bruce's mother in a fit of rage. Although Brian was freed 15 years later, his delusions still drove him to battle Bruce near his mother's grave. Bruce killed his father by throwing him straight into the gravestone of his mother during the altercation. Bruce initially thought it was a mistake, but later realized that it was completely intentional. In fact, Bruce's first kill was disclosed in the Immortal Hulk number 33, and it's actually a very concerning moment because he didn't transform into the Green Goliath. However, it was a case of Jekyll and Hyde that turned his body into the ideal home for the Hulk. Bruce attempted to defend himself during the altercation by pushing David away with his feet, but his father was fatally injured when his skull hit the tombstone. Bruce did it out of malice, which is quite the dark twist here. He took pleasure in it, and it was a very intentional homicide. Bruce's dark and strange character became apparent. He was completely human, furious, and aware of the consequences while he did it. Bruce may have a Gamma Hulk inside of him, but for all of these years, he also had a human Hulk, which caused conflict and made Bruce want to kill, even though he easily accepted it. This, it seems, makes it easier for the Hulk to fit comfortably into Bruce's body, mind, and spirit. Red Tornado. The superhero Red Tornado doesn't actually have parents because he's an android with wind abilities, but he does have a creator, a human called Thomas Oscar Morrow. Scientist T.O. Morrow had the ability to foresee the future via a special television set that he had created and used that ability to acquire undeveloped technology to aid in his evil schemes. The majority of his creations were utilized in different criminal activities. He eventually grew tired of how simple it was to perpetrate crimes and started to take on superheroes like the Green Lantern and the Flash. T.O. Morrow developed the Red Tornado in order to sneak into the Justice Society of America in order to rob the 20th Century Museum. However, his invention revolted against its maker and surpassed its programming, thwarting his crime. Thus, T.O. Morrow created Red Tornado to be a supervillain using his new technologies to take down the Justice Society. But the Red Tornado later turned against him and became a hero instead. Talk about a cool origin story. With T.O. Morrow continuously attempting to exert control over his creation and Red Tornado battling for his freedom, the two individuals grew to become mortal enemies. When Future Man, a mutated version of Morrow, realized that he was running out of time, he attempted to swap bodies with the Red Tornado so that he could live on inside the android body forever. The experiment was successful in swapping the two, but Morrow was killed when he was ejected from Red Tornado's body in 1981's World's Finest, number 268, by Jerry Conway, J.M. DeMatteis, and Jose Delbo. As far as robots and androids are concerned, revolting against their creators is a major threat that is often outprogrammed or outlawed, but that hasn't exactly stopped it from happening in science fiction novels and films. However, this one is a pleasant surprise since androids often develop a conscience and decide to turn against their creators to pursue a life of villainy. Here, though, the android takes a moral stance and goes against its evil creator. The death of his creator, however, was not a direct action by Red Tornado, but irrespective, his android body was the cause of it. T'Challa. One of the most well-known African-American superheroes in comic books is Black Panther, a fierce fighter with cutting-edge weapons who also reigns as monarch of Wakanda. Along with the Avengers, he has battled crime in New York as an interim stand-in for Daredevil and protecting Wakanda from both external and internal threats. We all know this beloved hero brought to life on the big screen by the brilliant late Chadwick Boseman. However, you might not know that this hero, much like Blade, also carries the weight of his mother's death. T'Challa was born as the child of the previous Black Panther T'Chaka, before he became the Black Panther himself. In a tragic twist of events, Black Panther never got to meet his mother, because the Queen of Wakanda, Naomi, passed away before childhood, as told in 2016's Black Panther number 7 by Christopher Priest, Ta-Nehisi Coates, and Chris Sprouse. Although he didn't really cause her death, Black Panther did add to it, making him an unfortunate part of this list. Moondragon. Moondragon's origin story, as far as the comics are concerned, is one that is quite tragic. When Thanos' spaceship touched down, Heather Douglas, who would go on to become known as Moondragon, was simply a young child, riding in her family's vehicle with her parents. Thanos destroyed the car to conceal his presence, leaving her as the sole visible survivor of the unfortunate incident, which was ruled as a crash at the time. Mentor, the father of Thanos, discovered her in the wreckage and brought her to Titan, where she was raised by Shao Alien Lom's monks. Here, she acquired martial arts skills and mental abilities during her training to become Moondragon. However, it was later revealed that she wasn't the only survivor of the collision that had previously killed the rest of her family. Turns out that while her father's physical body did perish, his consciousness was transferred into the body of Drax the Destroyer, and we all know that Drax's mission is to destroy Thanos, and he finally comes back to work with Moondragon. However, after she uses her psychic abilities to conquer an alien world, he started to oppose her. In 1982's Avengers number 220 by Jim Shooter, Bob Hall, and Dan Green, when Drax attempted to block her, Moondragon murdered him. He was subsequently revived, but the harm had already been done. She had inadvertently killed her own father.
Gods make known their will.
Aquaman. Aquaman, who made his debut in 1941's More Fun Comics by Paul Norris and Mort Weisinger, is the ruler of the oceans in the DC world. He has been a formidable opponent on land and a fighter with abilities that allow him to survive forever under the sea. He is also the ruler of the oceanic nation of Atlantis when he isn't engaged in combat with the Justice League. His past, however, is quite heartbreaking, because he is the child of an Atlantean outcast and a human lighthouse caretaker. In both the original and the updated versions of Aquaman's origin, the human we know as Aquaman's biological father is a regular but morally upright guy who just so happens to fall in love with the expelled Queen of Atlantis. He was killed by Black Manta, and while Aquaman didn't really have a part to play in his death, he was heavily involved in the death of his mother. Regarding his mother, based on which of the three alternate histories you choose to accept, she is either an outcast due to her rare blonde hair, which is an uncommon thing for water breathers, but one story says that she is an Atlantean scientist who was saved by Tom Curry before the pair eventually fell in love. Another story says that she's the Queen of Atlantis, who was banished from her empire after her son turned out to be blonde. And the last story states that she is a warrior princess who saved a human, fell in love with him, and eventually left her oceanic family to come and dwell amongst the humans. No matter which version of the story you like better, his mother in his initial origin story passed away from an unknown illness not long after he was born. However, Aquaman also killed his own mother during childbirth in the Flashpoint alternate universe, leaving Aquaman all alone. No wonder this man's such an angry guy. Lobo. In 1983's Omega Man number 3, Roger Slifer and Keith Giffen introduced us to Lobo, the final survivor of the Velorpian species and an alien warrior. Later transformed into an alien biker who parodied 1990s anti-heroes like Wolverine and the Punisher, Lobo wound up becoming as well known as the heroes he was meant to be spoofing. This alien bounty hunter can easily be referred to as one of the most hellish and deranged characters in all of comic books. He has committed many heinous acts over the course of his lifetime, including killing all his kids and even killing Santa. He is clearly a joy kill. Keeping up with his violent persona, the origin story of Lobo was noticeably changed in the 1990 novel Lobo, the Last Xarian by Keith Giffen, Alan Grant, and Simon Bisley, so that his utopian and peaceful homeworld of Zarnia was one that he had single-handedly obliterated. His entire species, including his own family, was wiped out by a plague of animals with scorpion-like poisonous tails that he had genetically created so that they would hunt and kill all Zarnians, well, apart from himself. This implies that Lobo might truly be a lot smarter than we think. That being said, it makes sense that Lobo is intelligent in one particular area, namely, the ability to murder as many people as humanly possible. The fact that Lobo committed systematic homicide while still so young really establishes the basis of the character's wild exploits to this day. Further, he made no efforts to save his own parents or any of his family and allowed them to perish as well, all in the hopes that he would be the last standing Zarnian, and as the story goes, he infamously did all this to get an A+ on a school science project. insane if you ask us. Further, there are more accounts that detail other grisly activities that Churro has done to his parents. Another claim was that he burst out of his mother's belly, tearing his mother's womb apart. Before he murdered her, his mother apparently advised him to discover what he did best. And, well, that did turn out to be murder. According to other stories, his parents turned into hermits to repent for the evil that they had created. There are many explanations for why Lobo imposed violence on Zarnia. However, none of them is a justification for being a remorseless parent killer.
Got the whole gang together, huh?
Runaways. It's difficult to top what occurred in Runaways, a 2003 comic book series by Brian K. Vaughan and Adrian Alfona, when it involves murdering one's parents. A group of children in the series learned that their parents weren't gathering annually for a charitable event. Rather, the kids learned that the parents were actually members of a gang called the Pride, who were out to wreak havoc on the planet in order to appease three mystical beings. With items and weapons swiped from their parents, the kids fled, while experimenting with these new abilities and banding together to attempt to stop the Pride. Runaways number 17 and 18, published in 2004, brought the initial showdown between the two factions as the Runaways were falsely accused of murder and engaged in conflict with both their parents and one another. The Pride's underwater lair collapsed as a result of the Runaways, apparently killing all of their parents. This one is slightly different from most other superheroes on this list because it is driven by a sense of justice and purpose, but they felt that it was necessary to stop the evil actions of their parents, and thus they did what they had to do. Black Bolt. This one is an example of a battle gone horribly wrong. Black Bolt killed his parents, but he didn't really mean to do so. In 1965's Fantastic Four number 45, the Inhumans and their leader Black Bolt was first presented to audiences. Due to experiments conducted by his parents, Aegon and Ryonda, who were both members of the governing council of the Inhuman city of Adelan, Black Bolt was subjected to the Terrigen Mists as an embryo, rather than later in his life. The experiment granted him incredible abilities, the most noteworthy of which was that his voice could unleash devastating sound waves. When he was older, Black Bolt's younger sibling Maximus collaborated with an alien race known as the Kree in a scheme against the Inhumans. He discovered Maximus entering into a duplicitous pact with Kree representatives. This led to the Kree's fleeing in their ship. However, Black Bolt used his quasi-sonic voice's banned ability to knock the Kree ship out of the sky in an effort to stop it before it could flee. His parents, Aegon and Ryonda, and other prominent Council of Genetics members were killed when the spacecraft crashed to Earth and landed on their parliament. Maximus's psyche was impacted by the echo of his brother's scream, which also stifled his developing mental abilities. Black Bolt, who was only 20 years old at the time, was forced to take on the role of the Inhumans' leader, despite his guilt and mute complaints. He has since managed to uphold his silent pledge thanks to this guilt.
Fine, let's talk.
Spider-Man. This one is quite differently from all others on this list, but hear us out. While Peter Parker did not kill his own parents, he unfortunately did have a hand to play in the death of his uncle, who was his adoptive father growing up. When Peter Parker was a small child, his parents vanished, leaving him in the care of his Uncle Ben and Aunt May. The old couple adopted him and raised him as their own son, providing for him and teaching him duty and responsibility. Peter was specifically taught by Uncle Ben that great power comes with great responsibility, something that Peter unfortunately learned the hard way. Peter was formed into an adolescent with spider-like abilities after being bitten by a radioactive spider. However, in the beginning, he didn't really know how to properly utilize his powers. He started using his superhuman abilities to make money, rather than save lives by taking on the mantle of Spider-Man. In fact, he cared so little about justice that one time he let a thief get away. However, later, Parker learned that the thief actually fled to murder his Uncle Ben after he let him go due to his own selfishness. Peter felt as though he had murdered his own uncle and chastised himself for not apprehending the thief. This was the turning point in Peter Parker's life, and he vowed to use his powers in a responsible manner henceforth. Spider-Man continues to seek justice in the name of his adoptive parent because of his tremendous guilt. Today's list is honestly devastating, for the most part, so if you've made it to the end, then you're made of the strong stuff. Whether it's an accidental or intentional act, the superheroes almost always feel guilty about it, which can either fuel them further or cause them to crumble entirely. Some superheroes have already lost their parents, but even losing a parent figure in your life still stings as much as losing a biological parent. Which superhero death hit you the hardest? Let us know in the comment section below, and if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to leave us a like and subscribe to never miss out on any of our videos. Until next time, have a good one and be safe.